Hi guys, and welcome back to our YouTube channel.
No, we're not doing this again, Stephenie. This is our 6th try. Lock in.
Okay. Welcome to our new journey of becoming human, where we explore connections about the cave and the oppressed with Stephenie
and Vennela. In the last episode, we discussed about how the oppressed are submerged by the oppressors through forms of dehumanization via language, which represents the shackles that chained the prisoners in Plato's cave,
and also the absence of dialogue, which is found on inequality, reflection, and the action that serves as a complement of what is called
praxis. The last episode illustrated 2 out of 4 of the main pillars of anti-dialogue, which are conquest, dehumanization, and cultural invasion, when the oppressed house the oppressors within themselves.
So today we're going to dive in and we're going to explore how the oppressors use divide and rule and manipulation to oppress people, leading to our ancestral question of today. What system are set in place to prevent people from achieving liberation? The sun, true praxis.
So first, we're going to begin with why gaining awareness and the concept of escaping is so uncomfortable to some. So I believe that, you know how we mentioned internalized oppression?
Yeah.
And how it created the fear of freedom in the last episode a bit. I wanted to talk more about how that can actually be seen as in our world contexts, and that is pertaining to like the refusal to entertain the idea of freedom because the oppressed find themselves incapable of responsibility and autonomy over their lives, right? And this is obviously the result of the manipulative tactics used by the oppressors and is similar to the quote, "It's better to deal with the devil you know than the devil you know."
You're basically saying that like the oppressed choose to stay in that position. They choose to know that they're going to live in this like life in which you're being fed the wrong part of life, but they continue in this regard because it's what they're used to. This is what they're growing up on. It's something they cannot change. It's like you can't teach like a old dog a new trick, like something like they say.
Yeah, exactly. And this is because they've been conditioned to it their entire lives, right? So they don't know anything past this, and even the idea of like regaining their own autonomy, they don't know how to deal with it. And I believe that this also creates a culture of silence where the oppressed cannot express themselves.
So it goes to generational. Like it doesn't like it starts with one person be like, like we like it home, we like it in the cave, we like it not knowing anything. For everyone be like, we've always been in the cave. Yeah. We don't need to be outside the cave because we already know the dangers outside. And why move on and why actually liberate ourselves when we know that it's only going to be hard? It's going to take years. And we don't even know if it's actually going to be a possibility.
Yes, exactly. And as you mentioned, like some people may know there's dangers outside of this, reality, even though it's false. But some people don't even know there's a reality outside. Right? That's because this cave is the reality. They don't know there's anything past it. And so when people are like, there is something past it, they're wondering, why are you questioning my reality?
And it's really similar to the Apollo's cave. When the prisoner gets free and he actually sees the cave, he's squinting from the sun, from the truth of his actual reality, in which is making him converse what he actually thinks. Now his reality isn't how he seems. It's different. It's unlike anything he's ever pictured, and it's so hard for him. It's so hard for him to remember that life as he seen isn't true. That life that he was been could be better. It could be more important. There could be more justice. There could be more people like him who are listened to, who are cared for, whose opinion are valid. And I really feel like it goes back to how fear causes division within the oppressions. The fear of finding out the truth, the fear of actually growing, the fear of living past ideals and moving on to the present. Like, would you agree?
I would agree, because I feel like, the fear that you mentioned is what separates the people that fear freedom from the people that want it, and that creates a division amongst, those who seek freedom and those who wish to stay within structures because they've been forced to depend on it. And I believe this ties to the 4 pillars of anti-dialogue, which is division and rule. And it's how the oppressor fragment the oppressed to keep them from unifying. And this can be done through race and class, right?
Yeah.
And I believe this ties to the book, Becoming an Ally, Breaking the Cycle of Oppression, by Anne Bishop, who wrote about how internalized oppression causes oppressed groups to be divided and fight against each other, then unite and fight the cause of their oppressor, which would be their oppressors, right? And this division and hatred against minorities is exactly what the oppressors orchestrate to only serve the interest of the oppressors. Because if they all unify, they would threaten the status quo, right? That leads to the question, why does the unification of the oppressed threaten status quo? I believe it's because then the oppressed would understand that their struggle is shared and interconnected and are not mutually exclusive consequences of, say, their shortcomings like the oppressors would like to state to justify their role in the system. I also think that anything that threatens the facade of the reality the oppressors paint reveals how it's actually been orchestrated by them all along, as though the reality is like a puppet the oppressors control with strings behind the scenes. And it's this very fear that causes dependence among the oppressed, which I would say ties back to our analysis in the last episode about how the oppressors need the oppressed to exist and vice versa. It shakes the foundation and the root of all the systems built up on oppression itself.
And it's like true false generosity that is giving the oppressors a reason for them to accumulate wealth and an unreasonable amount of money, which is used to justify the disparity between the rich and poor under a parentalistic guide of aiding the symptoms of oppression,
such as poverty and famine, through charitable programs that seek to maintain dependence and fails to actually address the root cause of oppression and poverty itself.
But I actually feel like the goodness of the rich being given back is really good. I feel like it really connects to the book The Gospel of Wealth by Andrew Cardigan, which he talks about the need for the rich to actually give back. If the rich actually took time to give back to the community, give back to the people in Andrew's Cardigan time who were in tenement houses, who never had even an opportunity to try, even the opportunity to have the spark to keep going, to know that there is a end of the tunnel for their hard work, an opportunity for like library to be given to them, education to be given, something they've never seen. Only the rich and wealthy, they have a seat at that table. It wasn't a big seat, it wasn't a marvelous seat, but it was at least a chance or stool to climb up the ranks. Tenement houses weren't going to be their only future. They can always move up.
But that leads to the question, who built these systems though that led some people to be stuck in poverty while others can sit in the table of wealth and knowledge and all that?
Okay.
Like, does that make sense? Because that's why this generosity is so false.
Don't cook me. Although you kind of cooked, it makes sense. I do agree. None of the table would be needed. None of the chairs would be pushed if it wasn't a system wasn't already created. But it already is. The table is already created. It's already launched. The rich are evil. Yeah. But now that it is, if they're actually trying to help, why aren't you encouraging it?
It's not encouraging it. It's that, see, when you say this idea that this table needs to be there in order for the oppressed to have a place there, it reiterates the idea that liberation can be only achieved through anti-dialogical means, when true liberation means everyone's equal. There is no table because everyone already has a seat in it. Anyway, there is no need to climb up ranks.
Yeah, but like the table is already there.
That's what dialogical action is trying to achieve, to eliminate
the
these
table
structures, these systems set in place that only strengthen the oppressors and put down the oppressed. This false generosity is exactly why the oppressed are so dependent on these structures and why they don't believe and why they don't believe they can lead a future beyond these systems, because they've been so dependent on these charities and these aids that now they're like, okay, say I do achieve liberation, right? What happens past that?
In a sense, but like I feel like what you're trying to just say is that the fair has to be expelled. But if I actually take the money out of my hand and I actually lock in, how would you actually explain how the fair is actually going to be expelled? Like,
The dialogical action that we've been speaking about is what actually unifies the oppressed by fostering the development of shared critical consciousness, which is gained through praxis, a cycle of action and reflection. And this critical awareness and consciousness doesn't just implant ideas in the minds of the oppressed, it rather cultivates original thought in the act of thinking for oneself.
So, in the allegory of the cave, you're thinking that this represents disillusionment in which the prisoners are not taking lead of themselves. They're taking their own actions to embark on a journey in which they're escaping the cave, in which they're starting to make their own choices, do their own thing, forgetting about the money and actually understanding
and why they need to get out of the system, right? And I feel like this idea connects to the book From the Bullet to the Ballot by Jacoby Williams, which follows the Black Panther Party and the Rainbow Coalition that was created to verify various marginalized groups like the Black Panthers, Puerto Rican Young Lords, and the Young Patriots the oppressors sought to divide, and they brought them together to collectively address police brutality and substandard housing in 1969. This was done by Fred Hampton, who did this through dialogical practices and pioneered the first multiracial alliance when they were previously divided.
Okay, the civil rights were the best era.
Yes, absolutely. So that leads us to the point, how does praxis actually catalyze liberation?
I feel like although it may be difficult to really understand it and it's even painful at first, we have to really embark on the journey. That through the cave, the oppressed actually learn to recognize the pattern of the oppression that's been going through their entire life. They have to reach that liberation and that reality the oppressors have hidden from them. Which is like the symbol of the sun, I would ask.
Right.
Since we've been talking about Apollo's prayer, I'm going to bring it up every time.
Right.
There may be moments where the oppressed falter in comforting the uncomfortable truth, making them lead to squinting at the sun, but there's the understanding that as they're looking and squinting, they finally see beautiful lights, beautiful colors in which they were hidden from the cave.
And now that leads to the question, what should those who now see this beautiful reality beyond the cave do after they've achieved liberation?
So I believe, like in any civil rights, in every revolution, it is time for the prisoners to go back to the cave and help others. One alone cannot achieve the whole growth. We have to become teachers to the students and students to the teachers.
Right.
So we have to make sure that they're all aware so they can achieve liberation.
So Stephenie, are there any components that are mentioned in this pedagogy that you disagree with or agree with?
You know me, in a lot of our medias, I have seen how the pedagogy of the oppressed thinking is seen.
Right.
Especially if we think about the Avatar. The Avatar, the last airbender, if we think about in Zuko's tribe, where they're all about the genocides of the Fire nations, burning down cities of peoples, bending, destroying cities, and the entire story is about how one person, one guy, the only one can save the entire people. And it's not until the end of the thing that we get the understanding that it doesn't take only one person to fulfill this role.
Yes.
Everybody needs to be participating in this role. But it also agrees and it also bless the system. But majority of the season, especially with the Zuko arc, which it talks about how the continuous need for only one person can say the word, only one person can stop a specific evil. There's a continuous theme that it has to be the teachers teaching the student. No student can ever step up to that ability. And it also seemed possible because it took 1,000 years for the Avatar to come up, but with the help of the understanding throughout the season, we keep on learning that in turn it doesn't take just one. Everybody gets an opportunity. With his crew of Zuko, Sakara, and all his friends, they come along and they defeat the same evil. And it has this sentimental theme to me in which it shows me that we can all take the roles of teachers.
Yes.
We can all build the story. But I know you're going to disagree, so
No.
just
No, I actually agree with the idea that movies in general or like any form of media does depict that there's only one person to save people, and this leaves the oppressed complacent, right? Which reinforces the idea that the oppressed are only objects and not who are acted upon, and not subjects that can act and transform reality. It only paints one person as this mighty hero when everyone has a role in shaping reality and achieving liberation, of course. And I actually also want to mention how while I was reading The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, I noticed that there was a lack of intersectionality in which the dynamic between the oppressor and the oppressed is depicted as a very strict binary. You know what I mean? Yet when applied to reality, it's evident that this dynamic varies in context, such that a poor white person, in an economical point of view, for example, would be classified as the oppressed, right?
Yes.
Because they are placed in the bottom of the hierarchy in relation to being rich or being poor. However, they may hold conservative and prejudiced views that may render them oppressors to marginalized groups. When this lack of intersectionality fails to address class, race, gender, and sexuality, among many other things that mark everyone different with shared experiences pertaining only to a few, it creates a monolithic experience of oppression that only addresses one form of it while allowing other structural oppressions like patriarchy and white privilege to stand unchallenged. Applied in practice, this may look like failing to recognize that a student of multiple marginalized identities isn't liberated when they're still mistreated for their race or ethnicity, and this quickly falls into the slippery slope of becoming an anti-dialogical pedagogy that only reinforces structural inequality. Although this pedagogy is necessary and still relevant to this day, some may argue that it's even more important now than ever, it needs to be updated with an intersectional lens that ensures that the teacher-students and student-teachers implement dialogical practices that are truly inclusive and don't leave anyone behind or force them into a role that assumes the position of a passive spectator instead of an active reformer.
So to recap, today we discussed how exactly the oppressors place oppressive system in the forms of creating fear of freedom, a culture of silence by dividing the oppressed, and true false generosity.
And we've delved into how exactly dialogue and praxis help the oppressed fight against these systems set in place to maintain status quo. Well, that's it for today.
And remember to stay human. I just want to say thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our wonderful team working behind the scenes to make this very episode available to you right now. I am so happy.
Yes, and I'm glad too. I'm so thankful, and we hope you have a great day today. This is your co-host, Vennela.
And Stephenie!
And we'll be signing off.
See you in the next episode.